vultures will pick the flesh from your bones after Kharis learns of your treachery. Just like Universal seems intent on picking over the bones of its horror properties until nothing is left. It's the Mummy's curse. The Mummy's Curse was released in 1944, the same year, only 8 months after The Mummy's Ghost. That, more than anything else, illustrates how prestige characters had fallen into a B-movie factory cycle of churning out quickies. Although the previous 2 films in the series take place in Massachusetts, The Mummy's Curse, with no explanation, is relocated to Louisiana. The swamplands from the end of the previous film are being drained to make way for some sort of commercial development, and Kharis' resting place is disturbed, bringing about his resurrection once again. You can't keep a good mummy down. Whilst the continuity lover in me thinks, why relocate it? There's no reason for it. It does allow for a cultural transplantation of the original tomb excavations. That old standby, remember, of the Europeans and the Americans, the Westerners coming over, doing the dig, the excavation, and the locals getting spooked and superstitious and running away and not working on it. Here, instead of the Egyptian locals, we have the superstitious Cajuns who refuse to work on the swamp, believing it to be haunted by the ghost of the mummy and the woman he was carrying, who perished there 25 years ago. Yes, that's right. 25 years have passed since The Mummy's Ghost, and if we believe that The Mummy's Hand, the first Kharis movie, took place in the year it was released, we're now somewhere around about 1995 or 1997. Just go with it. If you remember, it wasn't just Kharis that was submerged into the swamps at the end of The Mummy's Ghost. He was carrying Amina with her as well, the reincarnation of his love, Princess Ananka, and she is back, and her resurrection scene is superb. I cannot oversell it. The scene where she breaks through the crust of the dried out mud of the swampland is actually quite horrifying, genuinely eerie and unsettling. It's probably the best moment in any of the Kharis movies, and would happily stand shoulder to shoulder in the company of the best moments of any of Universal's classic horror output. Virginia Christie's physical work here is remarkable, and you will see future echoes in there of the J-horror subgenre with Sadako and Kayako from The Grudge. If I can find a link to that scene here on YouTube, I'll put a link in the description box below. Christie's half-hypnotized, half-dreaming memories of her former life lend an air of otherworldliness to proceedings that by now had become a little staid and a little ho-hum. She really helps sell the notion that a millennia's old soul and civilizations could haunt the present, something that has been sorely lacking since the haunting melancholy of 1932's The Mummy with Boris Karloff. Bringing Ananka back in this way points to potentially great areas of myth to explore. With Ananka now alive and in play, you can bring in a possession element. Is she Amina? Is she Ananka? There's also the possibility that she might not, after these 3,000 years, want to be the object of desire for a mouldering old mummy. Kharis hadn't thought about that, had he? Ananka alive and well in the present day, with some kind of agency. Damn, that would have been a great next movie. As the swamp receded, it was the power of the sun that resurrected her and nourishes her. And we all know that Kharis' regeneration is tied to the cycles of the moon. This thematic opposition of the sun and the moon between the characters would have been something I would have loved for this film to have explored further. or possibly subsequent films to pick up that baton and run with it, but alas, it was not to be. Lon Chaney Jr., whilst I think it's fair to say being given less to do here than he was in The Mummy's Ghost, is still pushing a character out past the bandages. I'm especially thinking of the way that Kharis in this movie grabs at the tanner fluid and gulps it down, this vitality-giving serum, as if he were an addict desperate for his next fix. A sad and tragic undercutting of this figure when you see him brought so low. There's a beautiful moment when he is attacking a landlady of an inn, and as she beats against his chest in this Blu-ray transfer, you can see plumes of dust coming off him. I love little touches like that. And again here, since all of these Kharis movies are effectively remixes of one another, a little twist put into the fatal flaw of the High Priest of Arkan. Here, the priest sent to fulfill the mission in the West stays on the straight and narrow. He doesn't go off script to abduct a woman, and as a result, I think he's a fairly forgettable character when measured against the three previous high priests. I love the idea that the high priests of Karnak or Arkan, or whatever you want to call them by this point, are like the heads of the Hydra monster, or like members of an organisation like Spectre from James Bond, or the rotation of number twos in the village from The Prisoner. This one is worthy of the position. He sticks on mission, and you largely forget about him. His helper, would you conceive of it though, decides to go off mission because he develops a rapey fixation on yet another woman that he's going to make immortal. So a remix rather than a radical rethinking of the approach to these movies. The suspicious locals, the tavern that features a couple of times in the movie, where they gather of an evening and sing and dance, the excellent ruined monastery hideout where our high priest cultists are staying, brought crashing down at the end of the movie in a typical Universal climax, gives this movie shades of the feel of one of their classic early Frankenstein movies. It's almost as if by this point they're really not sure what they can do with Kharis, so whilst lobbing in lots of familiar elements from this Mummy series, they're going to magpie bits and bobs from other things that were successful as well. It's not unwelcome, it is a hodgepodge. It gives a feeling to a fan like me of putting on a comfortable pair of slippers or something like that. I'm in familiar territory here. I can just sit down for 60 minutes and let the universal classic Gothicism watch over me without thinking too much. But my opinion is not the only one dredged up from the Louisiana swamplands, and I like to try and round these videos off with alternate viewpoints taken from Internet Movie Database user reviews. And the first one comes to us from Zimmer MK, who says, Frankenstein in mummy wrappings. Unfortunately, this film is typical of the watering down of a good film by numerous sequels. Universal made several serial monster films in the 1940s which were pale imitations of the originals. The intelligent Egyptologist Imhotep has been replaced by a leg-dragging Frankenstein in mummy wrappings who exhibits no signs of intelligent life. I don't think that's particularly fair. This film is entertaining in spots, but if you've seen The Mummy from 1932, you will be disappointed. Meanwhile, channel favourite Jacob John Taylor 1, who wherever possible will always get the final word, entitles his review, Warning, this is one of the scariest movies of all time. This is a really scary movie. This is scarier than The Mummy's Hand, and that is not easy to do. This is also scarier than The Mummy's Tomb, and that is not easy to do. This is also scarier than The Mummy's Ghost, and that is not easy to do. This movie has a great storyline. It also has great acting. It also has great special effects. 5.6 is a good rating, but this is such a great movie that 5.6 is underrating it. This is a 9. If this movie does not scare you, then no movie will. It is scarier than The Shining, and that is not easy to do. This is scarier than A Nightmare on Elm Street, and that is not easy to do. This is scarier than Halloween. All together now, and that is not easy to do.